Well, hello everyone. My name is Jordan. Welcome to Salesforce integration made easy with MuleSoft. Before we get started, obviously you guys have seen this screen a lot. Just make sure to make all your purchasing decisions based off products that are currently available. And so this is my title slide that I was given by Salesforce. It has my picture, it has my name, but since a lot of us might be developers in the room, I like to make it a little bit more interesting. So here's my speaker bio in JSON. So my name is Jordan Schutz. My title, I'm a developer advocate. Basically, my job is I basically create technical content for you guys. So when you come to MuleSoft.com and you're trying to learn how to get started, I'm the one who's working on creating that introductory content for you. So if you have any feedback about the product or have any feedback on that content, make sure to reach out to me. My email, my Twitter, and my LinkedIn is there. And then I'll be I'll try to be as quick as possible to make changes to that content. Some fun facts about me. I'm 6 foot 8 inches tall, so I'm one of the tallest muleys, or probably people that you'll see around this conference. Everyone always asks me, they're like, oh, do you play basketball? And I always tell them no, I make video games and I like to code, so definitely not a basketball player. Some background about me is I used to create indie games for the Nintendo Wii U and other consoles, and I used to be a mobile video game developer. Some of my games actually hit the top of the charts and were really popular among the kids, so that was really awesome to be able to do that, and that's kind of what got my foot into the tech industry. And some things that I love to do on the weekends is I love cars, and I love music, and then I love coding. So just from a show of hands in the audience, how many people here have actually used MuleSoft before? Okay, so we got 3 people. So a lot of people are new to it. And those that have used MuleSoft before, this we'll still be going over and we'll be diving deep into some more technical stuff. But for the people that are new, this will be a good introduction on kind of about the platform and how to get started. So we're going to do an introduction on MuleSoft. Then we're going to talk about how you can automate your business processes, then how to build your very first API, and then how we can actually integrate that API with Salesforce and then publishing our API. So why I decided to join the MuleSoft team was really I love the product. And I think what I love most about MuleSoft is that we really make designing APIs easy. And I think this is just a huge advantage of the MuleSoft platform. And so within Design Center, we have this online interface where you can go in and you can design APIs all from the web browser. So you can basically enter the title of the API, you can enter what protocols you want to support, and then on the left-hand side in resources, you can actually define endpoints, and then define if you want your endpoint to be able to accept post requests or GET requests. And then the RAML code, which normally if you were a developer and you were having to design your API from scratch, you would have to understand how to format that RAML code, how to scaffold it properly. But with Design Center, it actually does it all automatically. And then we have a mocking service built in similar to Postman, so that way you can go and you can actually test out your API yourself. And so this entire process is really made easy. And then as a developer, I can go and I can design my API, and I don't have to worry about any of the scalability or security because we manage all that for you. So we put the API in multiple different data centers. It's hosted around the world. So whether you're in Tokyo, you're here in California, we offer the lowest latency. And then in terms of security, all that security is all handled out of the box. So me as a developer, I don't have to worry about that. I just simply can focus on innovating, and I let them handle all the coding. So that's part of the reason why I love MuleSoft for designing APIs. But then when it comes to actually creating integrations, it's actually as easy as dragging and dropping. So when I was doing microservices development before, I would have to code all these custom scripts, and then my code would have to live on a bunch of different servers, and things would get decoupled, and it was a huge challenge for me technically. But with MuleSoft, I'm able to actually just create integrations by simply dragging and dropping with very, very little code. So we have tons of out-of-the-box connectors that you can drag and drop into your flows, and you can design the integrations behind your APIs very, very easily. And then lastly, why I love MuleSoft is we have such a huge, thriving developer community. In the session that I did the same session earlier this week. It was actually amazing. It was completely a packed room. And I think, it's Friday. A lot of people went to the concerts, and, they're probably a little tired. So you guys are all the really great developers who are committed to learning MuleSoft. So I appreciate that. But in terms of like why I love this community is like we host these community meetups around the world. Just in 2019, we hosted over 200 community meetups, and a lot of these meetups around the world are actually hosted by people like you who are passionate about our product, and they basically host technical talks. And part of the reason why I really love this is when I got started in the tech space and started to learn how to code myself, a lot of these meetups were where I would learn all the knowledge that I've learned today and how I self-taught myself how to code. So I think these meetups are a great place to meet other developers, learn about their technical challenges, and that way you can get started easier. So when we're talking about like your application and you're in your beginning phases of automating your business and you're thinking about using MuleSoft, and when you're thinking about creating your application, really your customers, they really expect your experience to just work out of the box. And if it doesn't work, customers will not have a good experience. So for instance, when I go to Nike.com and like, I'm pretty tall, so I wear, size 15 shoes, which, is pretty challenging to find, right? You can't go to the normal shoe store and find shoes that fit me. And so I'm always having to go on e-commerce websites, and I'm actually having to go and message these individuals and be like, hey, like, do you guys have my shoe size in stock, right? And so when I go and I chat with the support agent and I ask them some questions, and then I get immediate feedback back with them being like, yeah, we have that in stock, like here's a coupon code since we didn't list that on our website. And then I'm able to check out, and that entire experience was just seamless. But then on the back end, right, all those real-time experiences were all powered by APIs. And so if your customer is going to your website, they want to interact with you and they want that experience to be seamless. Another example is, let's say you forget your password, right? And you click the password reset button, you get an automated email in your inbox to reset your password. That's another example of that just working. And if, let's say, that customer doesn't get that email or doesn't get that real-time text message, it'll create a bad experience. So I just want to reiterate that MuleSoft can really help you build those types of real-time and seamless experiences. And so before we get started into kind of the technical demo, I just kind of want to set some ground rules on what is an API. So an API is an application programming interface, and it's usually built up of like 3 main layers. So we have the API contract, which I talked about earlier, where we created that in Design Center, and that's kind of like the code of what rules our API should follow. And then underneath that, those rules is some underlying business logic, which you can think of as the integration that we developed. And then there's usually a connectivity layer which connects to our end systems. So this is, maybe connecting that API to another API like Twilio to send a text message, or maybe, connecting it to SendGrid to maybe send an email. So that's kind of the basis of what an API is. And you basically, when you send a post request out to that API, you want to be able to receive a response. So now we're going to get into a customer checkout experience. And so you guys may know that the holiday season is coming up, and you guys might be thinking about what presents to buy your significant other. And so my girlfriend, she really, really loves cute things. And so one of her favorite things is unicorns. So her room is all decked out with a bunch of unicorns all over the place. And so I thought, what better to get her than this unicorn crochet doll? And I Googled it, and I found it on this website called sendaunicorn.com. And so what I did is I went and I added this unicorn to my cart, and then I went and I clicked the Pay with PayPal button. I entered some of my information of where I wanted this order to be shipped, and then I was greeted with the order confirmation screen. And so this entire checkout experience was really seamless for me, and I was able to check out in a matter of minutes, and like I felt like secure. I felt like I was actually going to receive the product, right? So as the customer, it was a really seamless experience, but as a developer, this is what I saw. So I saw that this entire checkout experience was all powered by APIs underneath it. So when you look at Amazon Pay or the PayPal button, right, these buttons are APIs, and we're sending requests out to their servers, we're doing some payment processing, and then they're sending us information back. And then even our coupon code, right, that's an API calling some database because the web store basically input a bunch of coupon codes saying, okay, this is what discounts we're going to offer, which ones are valid, and that API is confirming to make sure that coupon's valid. And then on the right-hand side, on the order confirmation screen, we're calling the Google Maps API to show relevant mapping information. And then even on the order updates, we want to get updates when our order is being received with Twilio. So Twilio will then send out order information updates with their APIs for USPS, FedEx, UPS. And so this entire checkout experience was all made by APIs, and this is all the sort of thing that you can do with MuleSoft's platform. And lastly, right, I received an email in my inbox from SendGrid and then a text message from Twilio. So once again, I just want to reiterate that MuleSoft can help you create these seamless experiences through APIs, and a lot of your applications are going to require a bunch of different APIs, and we can really help you do that easily. So even though we're talking in this talk about basically like a consumer checkout experience, I just want to reiterate that with MuleSoft, you can really develop anything. So people in all sectors, like the financial services industry, retail and consumer goods, healthcare, right? They use this for tons of different things. So just because we're talking about a checkout experience in this talk as the main demo, I just want to reiterate that no matter what your use case is, we will support it. So now let's actually get into the demo, and let's talk about the notification API and checkout process that I've created. So I created this demo using a Bootstrap theme, and I just wanted to show how we could create a basic integration with MuleSoft. So when we go to this page, there's an option to enter your first name, your email, and your cell phone number. So I'm actually going to go through, and I'm going to do this here. I'm going to enter my name, my email, and my phone number. And when I click checkout, it says order success. Now, on my phone here, I actually received a text message saying your sticker order is on its way. And then I received an email in my inbox in real time that says I've successfully ordered my sticker. So let's go here in my inbox. You can see right now at 9:12, just to show it actually is working, I received this email from that web form. And then if we go here into my notifications, let's see. I think do not disturb on, but on my phone here, I actually have a text message from Twilio. And then if we actually go into Salesforce, that lead got added into Salesforce. So that entire experience I created with MuleSoft. And so let's get into actually how I developed it. So we're going to first walk through how I designed this API and how I imported this API into Anypoint Studio, then actually how I built that integration on the back end. And then we're going to talk about how to publish that API, reuse it, and then finally integrate with Salesforce. So let's get into it. So as you saw on the previous screen, this is API Designer. And on the top left, I entered my title, checkout form automation with a version, and the different protocols that I'm supporting. And as you can see on the left, I created, let's see, I may have got logged out here automatically. Let me log back in. Let me refresh it. Okay, so on the left-hand side, you can see we have resources, and this is where we actually create our API endpoints. So under responses, I have a 200 OK response that our API will return. And if we go down here, we can actually specify what type of body we want our API to return. And in this body, we're basically going to say email has been sent as the return response. And then we're basically in the body here, we're saying that we only want to accept URL form encoded data. And if we click this little details button, we can actually give an example of how we want the data to be formatted. But we're saying that we want the data to be formatted as an object. And so here, you can see this is a web form. So when we actually submit this as a post request, that's being submitted to our API as URL form encoded data. And so on the right-hand side here, we have a mocking service. And this is similar to Postman if you guys are familiar with it. But Postman allows you to send post and GET requests. And so we actually have that built into our product automatically. So as you can see here on the right-hand side, we actually were automatically generated with a mocking service URL. And so if you're using a Postman-like client, you can actually plug this URL in and test your API before you even publish it. However, since it's actually built directly into the product, let's try it out. So if we click the send button, we'll actually get a 400 bad request error. and that's because we actually haven't given our API any parameters, and in our API specification on the left-hand side, you see that we require URL form encoded data, and we require it to be an object. So let's actually add an object, and I can add my name. And when we click send, you can see that it says email has been sent on the bottom right. So that's just one example of how we can basically design an API from scratch. And then when we click publish, we can actually publish this asset to Exchange now that we've successfully created our API specification. So when we go to Exchange, you can think of Exchange as being almost like an app store for all of your APIs and assets in your organization. And you can also publish these assets publicly, so that way other people can consume them. So it can be in your organization, but it can also be outside of your organization as well if you so choose. So since we've created this API, it's located here, and this is our REST API that's located in our Exchange. And you can see that at the top, we were able to add some details like, what our API does, how to use our API, and we even added a diagram. And you can see on the right-hand side, we can actually see different versions of our API. So at any time, if we want to roll back, let's say we publish a change that caused an issue with our application, we can easily roll back to the previous version. And then even on the left-hand side here, in our API specification, we define some endpoints, and these endpoints are all listed here on Exchange. So that way you can basically create your API for your developers. Your developers can then go and learn how to consume this API in the correct manner, all within the Exchange portal. So now that we have published our asset to Exchange, we've added directions, now what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna create our integration. So we're gonna navigate over to Anypoint Studio, and this you can download for free off the MuleSoft website. And Anypoint Studio, you can think of it as an IDE to create your integrations. So what we can do is we can go to File, New, Mule Project, and we can name our project whatever we want, and then when we go to add a dependency, we can actually choose from Exchange. So that API that we had just created, we can go and we can search for it here. Let's see if the internet will work. So while that's searching, so basically it'll pull up a bunch of different APIs and integrations that we've created, and then you can basically select what API you want to import into your project. Did my Anypoint Studio crash? It may have crashed. So let's see. No, it did crash on me. Well, guys, that shouldn't have happened. I have a lot of windows open right now, so let me just force quit this out. There we go. I'll load it back up easily. It's because I'm on an early access version, so you never know. Some things can be a little finicky here. All right. So while this loads up, so essentially what we were able to do is we went to a new project. We were able to take our API that we created on Exchange and then import that into Anypoint Studio. And as you can see, since when we did that, now it automatically created our scaffolding. So you remember that in API Designer, we created all the rules and regulations in RAML of what our API was, how it was supposed to be formatted. But now that's all created here automatically for us, which saves us a lot of time and saves your developers time as well. And you can even see that each of these are different errors. So these are called on-error propagates. And what these do is these actually will return errors if a developer, let's say, sends an invalid post or GET request to our API. It'll return them with some data, so that way they can know how to properly format their message. So then if we keep scrolling down, you can see that those two endpoints that we created, send email and send text message, they're both listed here, and these are called flows. And they're built up of a few components. So let's go into the send email flow first. So let's see. So when we click on this transform message, you can think of a transform message. It's basically taking one type of data and converting it to another type. So I'm going to go back to this PowerPoint here to kind of explain a concept that you guys might be fairly new to. And has anyone in the audience heard of Data Weave before or no? Okay, so we have just a few people. So Data Weave is MuleSoft's powerful transformational language. And I don't know, has anyone in the audience actually like tried to convert XML to JSON before? Yeah? Okay, so we have a few people that have done it. Was that process easy or was it hard?
It's not fun.
Exactly, right? So do you want me to show you how easy it is with Data Weave? Yeah? Okay. So let's go over into our Data Weave editor, and this was actually created by an engineer at MuleSoft to basically make using Data Weave easier. So on the left-hand side, we have our XML code, and in the middle, that's our Data Weave. So we simply just output, okay, we want it to be application JSON, and we're just gonna put the payload as being the descriptor of what we want to convert. And then on the right-hand side, this is JSON. So in one line of code, you're able to convert your XML into JSON. But that doesn't just work for this data type, it works for basically everything. You have, basically, Data Weave supports all different types of data types. So let's say you have a CSV file and you want to convert that over into another data type, you can do that with Data Weave. And like we can even go in and let's add a script in real time. And see right here, we were able to do .phonebook, and then we're able to select the value in the array. And so you can see that whatever we're outputting, we can output it in whatever format we want. So we can create powerful data transformations. You know, CSV to JSON, JSON to XML, you know, XML to Java, whatever we want, we can do it with Data Weave. So going back to our send email flow. So we want to send this email to SendGrid, but SendGrid, as you know, requires their payload to be in a certain format, right? Because their API has certain requirements. And so what we want to do is we want to take our form that we've submitted and then basically use Data Weave to create that custom payload and then send that out to SendGrid. So we've done that simply with the code on the right. So we have the from field, we have the to field, and we have the template ID, and we created that custom payload on the bottom right. And then we have our HTTP request here, where we've basically just added some headers. We've added a bearer token and the application JSON content type. And now we're sending this API request to SendGrid, and just like that, we'll receive that automated email when that post request gets sent to that API endpoint. And then on the send text message endpoint, we have a similar thing. We've added some Data Weave code that basically formats the data in the way that Twilio needs it. So Twilio requires it to be a JSON payload, and you need to have the fields to, body, and from. So I entered my phone number there that I'm sending it from, and then I'm, hello, Jordan, your sticker order, it's on its way, and then to from send phone number. And then we just simply dragged and dropped the Twilio connector into our scene, and now we're able to send those text messages automatically. And you can see here on the right-hand side, this is our Mule Palette, and this is where we're able to basically drag and drop different components into our scene. So let's say we wanted to add, you know, Salesforce. We can go in here, and we can do create. And so let's say we want to add a lead right after we send a text message with Twilio. We can simply do that here. So now that we've created our API and integration, what we can do is we can right-click on the folder, and we can go to any point platform, and we can click Deploy to Cloud Hub. And when we do that, our API and integration will now be hosted in the online ecosystem. So let me load up the next part of this demo here. It seems like it closed on me. So now the next product that I'm going to get into is Flow Designer. So Anypoint Studio is made more for like the developer-centric sort of audience, but Flow Designer is really for anyone. It can be marketers, it can be anyone that doesn't really have experience with coding, because in your organization, you might want your developers to create these complicated APIs on the back end, and then you might want to give this to other people in your business organization that can then go and reuse those components to create very simple flows. So Flow Designer allows you to do that. So what we've done is when we go to this checkout process, this form gets submitted, and it gets actually submit to this endpoint. And we've created an HTTP listener that's listening to the post/submit endpoint here. And so that data gets sent, and then we have a variable that stores that payload. And we added the Salesforce connector create. And as you can see, we've created some Data Weave code that formats our data in the way that Salesforce requires it. So we've added company, last name, email, and phone number. And just like that, it'll create our Salesforce lead in Salesforce, because we've actually selected lead from right here in this drop-down menu, but you can see that there's tons of other options that you can choose from if you're using the Salesforce connector. And then remember that API that we've just created in Anypoint Studio? Well, we've actually imported that into our project here. So you can see that the create send text message connector is right here. And this is the API that we created in Anypoint Studio. So let's say that you, like other people in your business organization, create these APIs. You can simply just go here. You can click the plus button, and then you can search for that API that you've created, and then you can implement that right in your application just in a few clicks. It's really that easy. So that's kind of a little explanation of how I basically created this entire checkout process. So you saw that I was able to, I entered my first name, my email, my phone number, and then I got an automated text message and an email, and that's how simple it was to create that basic integration. So let's kind of talk about that schema that we just went through. So we created a system layer API, and this was our email API and our SMS API, and the system layer APIs basically connect to these outbound systems like Twilio, like SendGrid, right? Because each of these end systems require the payloads to be in a certain format. And then when it comes to designing APIs, then our process layer API, which we created the notification API, is able to basically segment that data and then basically connect to those system layer APIs. And then on the final layer, our experience layer, these APIs you usually want to create for our different experiences that our users will experience. So for instance, like the web form and maybe a mobile API, that's basically how you would design your API infrastructure if you were, So I'm trying to think of another example to show you guys right now. So we were talking a lot about taking one data type and converting it into another. And so this is a separate example because we have a little bit more time, and I just want to make sure I show you guys all the different MuleSoft examples. So there might be cases in your business where, let's say you have a CSV file, but there's a CSV file on one server and there's a CSV file on another server. And you basically need to take these two data types and then convert them together. So we've actually created a simple flow here that does that. And so I'm actually going to, let's see if we have some. Okay, so I'm going to stop the test. I'm going to restart it. So what we have on one server is we have name, last name, email, and company information. And then on another server, we have annual revenue. And there are many cases that this could happen. And so using Data Weave, we can basically take these two data types and bring them together. So I'm just going to wait for this to finish testing. Let's see. We're going to get a response. There we go. It's successfully executed. So let's go here. So you can see from our FTP server, we have first name, last name, company, and email. So you can see there's 3 entries. And then you can see that this is the CSV file, but then our output looks like this. How did that happen? Right? So we went from CSV file looking like this to CSV file looking like this JSON. And so you can see that we've written some Data Weave code to do that. So we've simply mapped a payload and then entered some information. And so now our payload looks like this, right? But we want to take annual revenue, which we're getting from this HTTP request, which annual revenue looks like it's in this format. So you can see that we have company, MuleSoft, their annual revenue is this, along with a few other examples, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to write a Data Weave script that basically combines annual revenue with the already existing information that we got from the other CSV file. And when we do that, let's look at the output. So you can see that we went from having this input to now annual revenue has been appended to each object in the JSON object. So you can see that annual revenue for MuleSoft is now appended to this object. So then what we're going to do is we're going to do a for each statement, which basically will run through each object, and we're going to create each of these objects as a new lead in Salesforce. And simply to do that, we just said, okay, just add each one as a payload and add it as a new lead. And so now each of these objects will be added in Salesforce. So that's just an example of how easy it is to integrate Salesforce with MuleSoft. It's simply just one connector, and then you can use DataWeave to basically create those transformations in any way that you see fit. So some resources for you to get started. Developer.mulesoft.com. We have technical tutorials built, so that way, even if you have no experience with the platform, you can easily learn how to get started. And then we have forums, so those are for more like specific questions. You can go on there, and we have tons of community leaders who are on these forums daily that will help you answer your technical questions. And then alongside that, we have training where you can actually meet with an instructor and take a class and get step-by-step instructions on how to create APIs and integrations. And you should definitely come to one of our meetups. We host a variety of different technical talks, and they're a lot of fun, and you'll get some free food, and it's pretty great. So I think that's the end of my talk. I have an extra 10 or so minutes if anyone has any questions, but if not, thank you so much for coming, and I hope that you learned something more about MuleSoft today. Thank you. Yeah, do you want to step up to the mic, or? Okay, yeah, cool. What? I can post them really as soon as you want. Yeah, I'll post them on probably like LinkedIn, or I can post them on our developer site if you would like. Yeah. Yeah. So are you saying that you created your basically your API specification in Design Center, and did you import that API into Anypoint Studio? Yes. Or you say you import it into Flow, because you can't import it into Flow Designer. So I designed it in the Design Center. Okay. It's a valid API spec. Yeah. And I actually imported that into the Anypoint Studio. Okay. So that I can create my scaffolding before I start developing on the Mule app. So the API spec actually throws error, which is not very intuitive. Interesting. So it could be a multitude of different things. It could be that your Anypoint Studio version differs from the Design Center version. So if there's any like differences in the versions, that can also throw errors. I'm not sure, were you using API Kit to automatically scaffold the application, or when it did that, it would throw errors for you? Oh, so yeah. So you need, I'm using Mule 4 here. So, but yeah, if you go to File, New Mule Project, and then you go to Add a Dependency, and then you choose from Exchange, it should just work out of the box if my application doesn't crash again. But yeah, this is how you would do it. I haven't seen a lot of things error, but it could be the version. And honestly, if you are running into that issue, you can always like post on the forums, or you can honestly just email me and we can like look into it and see specifically what the issue is. But most likely it's just the versions. Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I think it's actually listed in your actual like API spec, like what version it was created with. I'm pretty sure, potentially. I'm not sure. But let's follow up offline about that, because I would be interested to know what issues you were running into. So yeah, but thank you for letting me know. I appreciate it. Yeah.
To the mic. Currently, I'm looking at a client project. They have integration with some proprietary application. The integration was written using REST API, Salesforce, so the post, the get, and all that. And we're evaluating if we can swap that with MuleSoft. That's the first part of the question. The second part, what are some of the, pitfalls that you might want to just ahead of us be careful of and look out, and if the process is doable, actually replacing all that thousands of line of REST API code that was written in Apex with MuleSoft. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thanks for the question. So I think to answer the first part of the question, we still are creating REST APIs here with MuleSoft. So what I created was a REST API, and I think that's what's great, is that you can rapidly create these REST APIs with MuleSoft in any way you see fit and for what fits your application. In terms of converting over, I think the process would be pretty seamless. Like, I think you were mentioning that you've created a lot of like point-to-point integrations, right? So a lot of integrations where you have like basically code that if anything gets upgraded, it could potentially break, right? So I think that's really why a lot of companies choose to go with MuleSoft, is to basically prevent that. We're all about, reuse. And so if, back to that diagram that I was showing in my presentation with like the system layer and the process layer, and experience layer APIs, is that you want to basically architect your application from kind of the bottom up, because when you do that, and you basically create your entire application with APIs, you can then make changes to just the top layer, and then none of the other layers are, they're basically unlinked, So the bottom layer APIs then won't affect the top layer APIs. I don't know how else to describe it. It's kind of complicated without looking at your exact use case, but what I can say is a lot of people have came over to the MuleSoft platform, and they've had a lot of success, and they've been able to convert over very, very seamless. And I think this whole drag and drop interface for your developers is really advantageous, because when we update a connector or we update a version, all that will get changed for you pretty much automatically.
So we would like to hand it over to the admins to be able to maintain that in the future if they need to add more fields.
Yeah, no, and I think that's just what the power of MuleSoft is, that we enable all that for you in an organization really from the bottom up. So if you have more specific questions, though, we can kind of like walk through it more technically for sure. Oh, perfect. Okay, yeah, feel free to send me an email and we can follow up. Does anyone have any other questions or no? If not, that's kind of the end of the session. I have 3 minutes left, so thank you all for coming. And if anyone wants any stickers, you guys can come up and I have some. So thank you.